Chris and Ann and Jenny, I remember you running into Mumford Hall, running into his office, climbing on his lap, and enveloping him in hugs. And then quickly running down the hall to Warren Wessel's office and doing the same thing. Relishing that attention and being lavished with attention by Warren. Chris and Josh, Ann and James, Jenny and Evan, you and your children brought immense joy to Chuck's life. And I know through your love for him, you sustained and enriched his life. Those of us here today empathize with the words that Chuck and Jan's good friend Dale Tamke said when he said, "We have a Chuck-shaped hole in our hearts today." Chuck and Louise grew up on a farm near Oneida. He was proud of being from the O in ROVA, the consolidated schools that included the equally small surrounding towns of Rio, Victoria, and Altona. Despite annoying Ines King, his young and inexperienced high school choral teacher, whose daughter ended up being my college roommate, Chuck earned an F in chorus. I don't know if the choir knew that. And he wouldn't ever tell us why. But he was such a well-regarded student that he was asked, not surprisingly, to give the commencement address at his ROVA High School graduation. When I think of Chuck and Louise growing up in rural Knox County, I think of how his parents nurtured and tilled that soil. And then I think of how Chuck did the same thing, nurturing and tilling and cultivating and enriching students' lives. Indeed, Chuck did the work that we are called to by University of Illinois President Andrew Draper in the late 1800s. In the words on the face of Davenport Hall, "The wealth of Illinois is in her soil, and her strength lies in its intelligent development." Chuck's life was devoted to intelligent development. He began his work at the University of Illinois in the admissions office and soon moved to the College of Ag, where he spent almost the rest of his life, making sure that students felt heard, understood, cared for, and capable. When his obituary appeared in social media, friends and former students filled the space with tributes to his impact on their lives. Stan Levy, who was the vice president for student affairs for many years, said Chuck was a giant among those who really consistently and unendingly cared about students at UIUC. He was a prince. Bob Easter, who had so many roles here, including president of the university, said, "I was in the college for every minute of Chuck's career, from the day he arrived until his retirement, and there was never a moment in which his contributions were not excellent. It is a loss to humanity." And finally, one of the students who felt especially welcomed captured him beautifully when she said, "He was a walking smile." After beginning his undergraduate career at Illinois State University, he transferred to the University of Illinois and received his bachelor's and his master's and his PhD from Illinois. He devoted 30 years of his life to his career in the college, and when he received the University of Illinois Loyalty Award, it expressed what we all knew deep in our hearts. Chuck Olson never approached his ACES role as a job. Rather, it was a privilege to do exactly what he had always wanted to do. Being Assistant Dean for Student Development and Career Services was his passion, a service project that happened to pay a salary. It's hard to choose from all of the important things that Chuck did for students, alumni, in the College of ACES, but among them all, the JBT Scholarship Program stands out. And it's so wonderful to see several JBT scholars in the front row who are serving as pallbearers today. I remember Chuck as the conductor, the first violinist, and the entire percussion section of the orchestra that was the JBT program. Initially conceived by John Campbell back in 1979, the program flourished and survived and thrived because of Chuck, because of his devotion and his remarkable attention to the details. Last December's banquet was the, wait for it, 40th JBT banquet, for those of us who were at the first one. And we were told then that $5 million has been awarded in scholarships to students since that first year. 2,200 students' lives changed by the JBT scholarship program in those 40 years, and Chuck presided over more than half of them. Bruce Michelson was a friend of Chuck's and the former head of the campus honors program and professor of English on the other side of the quad. And Bruce said, "The way I saw it from the bleachers of the campus honors program and the humanities, the JBT honors gatherings that he worked so hard to put together so many times were like nothing else on campus, as a way of recognizing and thanking bright young people and their parents, and boosting morale and togetherness in the college." Catherine Stoll-Rayberg, one of those JBT scholars and former student workers on the JBT program, described perfectly my memory as well. She says, "I can picture him so clearly with his rolled up sleeves, a huge smile on his face, sitting in his office, and ready to welcome any student who came in to sit down and have a chat. He had such a way of guiding you and allowing you to come to the right decision on your own. He was such a thoughtful listener and opened so many doors for so many students." For more than 20 years, Chuck also served in the role of secretary of the Ag Alumni Association. He followed in the footsteps of some giants, Frank Minor, Duke Regner, Carl Gardner, and Warren Wessels. And he gave that Ag Alumni work the same careful devotion as he gave to everything else, and that those men before him did as well. We traveled together from Dixon Springs to Galesburg, from St. Charles to Eckert's Orchard in Belleville, and from downtown Chicago to Greeksville, all the while connecting with alumni and friends about their alma mater. His beautiful tenor voice was called on at the end of nearly every gathering to lead the crowd in a moving rendition of Alma Mater. Most of us who knew and loved Chuck also knew and loved Warren Wessels, who you may remember their friendly, long-standing rivalry over baseball. About Chuck's two beloved baseball teams, the Cubs and the Detroit Tigers, and Warren's St. Louis Cardinals. When Warren retired, Chuck was the one who facilitated Warren's retirement gift, being 2 baseball tickets to Major League Baseball games at every park in the country, as well as a surprise party for him at a St. Louis Cardinals game. After Chuck retired, he joined Warren at Carl Foundation Hospital as part of the Wednesday Dream Team Auxiliary Escort Service, logging more than 2,000 volunteer hours escorting patients and their families around the hospital. And Lynn Jones tells me that when Chuck concluded his volunteer service at Carl, they threw a party for him, which was not typical for all of the volunteers. His volunteer service, of course, in this community started long, long before his retirement, and anyone who knows them knows how devoted they were to this church. He held nearly every leadership role in this church and joyfully sang in the chancel choir for more than 40 years. And today we all have to thank Barbara and the choir and Ray and coming up Carlisle for the beautiful music that is so reminiscent of what we know about Chuck. As we share the stories and the memories today, I think it's important that we remember the lessons that he taught us. Let's remember to offer to others what we saw in his walking smile, his hearty laugh, and his eagerness to help others. Bruce Michelson said, every time we saw him in these past few years, we admired the fact that he was very much out there, doing what he could to assist others, to give back, to participate in life, never selfishly, never desperately, but with an open heart. He taught us something about how to be mortal. Spangler is an ACES alumna. She's a farmer, and many of you know her as the editor of the Prairie Farmer magazine. And I think she summed it up best. You made a difference, and that was everything.
I had the privilege of working with Chuck, indeed a privilege, in the Dean's office. It's my opportunity to share with you the appropriate gospel lesson, which comes from St. Matthew chapter 5. This is where Jesus gathered his disciples together to assure them that they would indeed receive their reward. Chapter 5, verse 1. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And our dear Chuck has arrived.
Pray for me as I pray for you. Be with us right now, O Holy Spirit, in these moments. Crack open our hearts, open our minds to your life-transforming word. A word that Chuck heard and responded to right now. John wrote, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. And they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away.' And the one who was seated on the throne said, 'See, I'm making all things new.'" The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. All right, some of you haven't been here in a while. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. We're in the right. I'm already going to leave the notes. Now you know, nobody accomplishes everything we just heard by himself, by herself. We all travel through time together. And there need to be people around us who care for us and critique us and lift us up. And here they are. They're glad to hear the wonderful celebrations, but they're grieving the one they love. Dear Jan and Chris and Jenny and Ann and Louise. I haven't forgotten you. I went to the Obama School of Pause. To you and your family and friends and colleagues of Charles Edward Olson, who apparently nobody called that name except his mom. A long time ago, if you knew him as Charlie. A lot of us knew him only as Chuck. Or Honey. Or Dad. On Sunday evening, April 14th, Chuck closed his Ag Econ books and set aside his scholarship applications and student records and hung up his orange and blue gear and his Carl Auxiliary badge for the last time because his greatest work, his life, was completed. And today we remember. What a powerful word, remember. Today we remember with affection and thanksgiving a husband and father and grandfather, a mentor, a colleague, an educator and friend, a brother in Christ whose life, I believe, was a reflection of God's love. I have been at this long enough now now to assure you that the last chapter of a person's life does not define their whole life. You know that. My goodness, it was a long, hard last chapter. To be honest, we don't understand the why of Alzheimer's. It's a horrible disease. And there are multiple victims, not just the person suffering, whole families. And apart from any affirmation of faith, we can say that his time of suffering is over, and so's yours in that regard. We grieve yet. He need suffer no more. Of course, the rest of us are trying to understand and comprehend and make sense of all this, as you've been trying to do for over a decade now. Jan, and girls, may I call you girls? Why does God allow this? Why not eliminate this particular scourge of creation? Louise, I know you'll appreciate that later in life I discovered I had sisters. There was what's her name and the young one. I don't know. Well, what you all don't know, we grew up among farmers. We weren't farmers, we've been freed from that. Moved on up. But we were given a rabbit hutch and rabbits. This is a true story, I didn't just make this up. We were given a rabbit hutch and rabbits. And great big white rabbits, and we worried that they were going to live outside all winter. And the farmer who gave them to us explained that they were protected. He said, well, they don't have what they need now to survive winter. But their fur grows as it gets colder. And they will have what they need when they need it. Chuck, in the depth of his suffering, got what he needed as he needed it. We will too. We're not left alone. We gather in this place where Chuck joined the choir in singing praises to God for over 40 years. I mean, they didn't sing straight for 40 years. They and they come in once a week. What's that?
Last week it's been like 4 or 5.
Wow, okay.
It was an Easter.
And at Easter, longer. But we gather to affirm that we too are accompanied in our grief by the love of God. We are not abandoned, we are protected, even in deep sadness. Now, I'm well aware that you may bristle at what sounds like a rather cavalier affirmation of faith. You who suffered with and nurtured and cared for and changed over a decade, over all these past years, have every right at times to bristle at easy words of faith about a loving God, because you too suffered deeply, and you've had your long nights of the soul and eyelids that reflected long nights, and you've had to wonder about God's love. But listen, you never stop loving Chuck. You joined God in protecting him. You were his hands to Chuck. You were his memory. You couldn't stop his illness, even though with all your hearts that's what you wanted to do. Instead, you held him. You used your hands and your hearts. And all the while, God was holding you with a love stronger than Alzheimer's and death. I do not understand why our lives are shattered by this disease. But I do know that he got what he needed when he needed it. You and I can now bear witness to his whole life, where he learned early on how to, and this is a biblical phrase, how to number his days and apply his heart into wisdom. thank you, dear sister Leah, for inviting me. When I was first appointed here 23 years ago, and we're not going to get a lot of these memory stories. Will you keep Kleenex up here? I asked Chuck, I said, why is the entire school of aces members of this church? And he said, because we're all small-town farm kids, and the only church around was a Methodist church. And you were, John Matthews was here. How many remember John? You know, that was a long time. Some of you need help out now. You know, that's how far back I go. Anyway, I've lost my place. Chuck, Charlie, Charles, however you knew him, did what many of us fail to do. He appropriated all the rich gifts, opportunities, and relationships bestowed upon him. All the nurturing granted by his parents and his church. All the academic preparation granted him by two fine universities. And of course, all the love and support freely given to him by his wife of nearly 50 years, Jan, and his daughters and grandchildren, and his extended family. And Chuck took all of this and he placed it on the altar of service, and he became a part of everyone he met. For 14 years, I was privileged to serve as his pastor, and I'm confident that along with, as you've already heard, his colleagues and the students of ACES and his friends and neighbors, as well as you, his family, we would also echo the sentiment that we knew him as one who was committed to serving others. Not one who felt he ought to be served. Ironically, he needed service. It wasn't in his nature. And we all know that behind his vibrant, smiling, and caring spirit was a brilliant mind, a loyal heart, a loving and compassionate man. Now, while the fading of memory has been much on your minds for many years, now it comes as a servant and as a balm in your grief, and our sorrow is already stirred up. Paradoxically, comfort comes when we remember. And I want to thank you for meeting with me yesterday. When I asked you about memories, Chuck, you recalled the puns. Even later when they didn't quite work, they were still weirdly funny. And they fit his sense of humor, which his sense of humor included a joke that eluded Jenny. You'll have to ask her. And a t-shirt slogan that 10-year-old Chris, I think you said you were 10, you didn't catch until somebody told you what that shirt meant when it said, horticulturists do it in the garden. Is that a shirt a father should wear? You've sanctified him, but we've come to put him down in the dirt a little bit here. Speaking of t-shirts, orange and blue shirts, caps, jackets, hoodies, all were orders of the day, you told me, even when the whole family was attending a game in which Illinois was not playing. And there was this genetic trait within him that called him to see someone clad in orange and blue out in the crowd and shout out, ILL. Turns out this doesn't work in Florida or Boise State. No matter, he made connections everywhere, which is one thing universally affirmed about him. He was outgoing. He was genuinely, really nice. Genuinely well-liked. He was able to engage you, and he drew people out and included them in the conversation. As one of you told, you feel better after you've talked to Chuck. made him great in his early role in academic intervention. I think you told me that when you would meet someone on campus who said, I just had an appointment and I met with your dad, he's a wonderful man. And you were thinking, oh my God, your career here is just about over, because when you meet with him, you're in academic trouble. But they didn't realize it, because he was kind of like Norm on Cheers. And he fired you and it was okay somehow. Thank you, Dean Olson. May I have another? But he did save more than a few lives while at ACES. Over and over, students who were on the fence, we were told, about international study, were encouraged by Dean Olson, and that they would become better students and better persons if they left the comfort zone of agricultural Illinois and crossed a border and went to some other corner of the planet. Maybe like with his own daughters, who all had to go to places that began with I, India and Italy and Ireland, and after I knew Chuck, I went to Illiopolis. There were baseball stadium tours and world travel together with friends, and you know that, singing in the choir, and photos and photos and photos, and all of these are pegs upon which to hang memories. The joy-filled, caring, loving, sometimes struggling, sometimes frustrating relationship with husband and father and grandfather. Each of us here this morning has a wealth of memories and experiences with Chuck, and I know you've been sharing these stories, and that they'll bring to mind many more, and I encourage you to share them with his family. Reflect for a moment on how many persons this man's life touched. Obviously his family, but hundreds, thousands of students, colleagues, farmers around the state and the country and the world, and friends and neighbors and fellow parishioners in this congregation. And so I invite you to continue his memory and tell stories. Bless his family and share their grief by sharing your memories. Let each word remind you of the loving man that he was. I also invite you to entrust your grief and your sadness to the God who created Chuck and you. The one who receives him now is the same one who gave him life and that servant spirit and that smile. We can give thanks even on this occasion to God for being with us and with Chuck all his life, and as he walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and that God gave him what he needed when he needed it: protection and comfort and safety and peace and your love. Long ago, St. Augustine wrote, God loves each of us as if there were only one of us. Today, let's again affirm the one who gives us all life, who desires for each of us that place where there is neither brokenness, nor separation, nor peril, nor crying, nor pain, nor dying. See, says the God of all creation, I am making all things new. The challenge for us as we look back over the entire span of Chuck's life is to realize our lives, to grasp their full significance, that we might see each other with a deeper appreciation and respect. Of course, things are going so well in the country right now, we don't need any more appreciation and respect. No. How do we learn to appreciate and respect differences? This man showed us how. We know that many years ago, and this is why, Charles Edward Olson was baptized at an altar of God.